McLaren Formula 1 team. 863 Grand Prix starts, 182 wins, 12 Drivers' World Championships, and 8 Constructors' World Championships, making them one of the most successful teams ever in Formula 1, just behind of the prancing horse, which is, of course, Ferrari. McLaren have made a whole name for themselves, ever since Bruce McLaren founded the team all the way back in 1966. They've been on an absolute dominant force ever since, and even in present day, during the the rot of when they went back to Honda power as recent as 2015, they're slowly and surely making their way up the grid once again, and hopefully be a dominant force like they were back in the 70s, 80s, and even 90s. But what if you just removed McLaren in general from Formula 1? What if Bruce McLaren never came up with the idea of creating his own Formula 1 team? What if he didn't want to do it? What if he just never had the passion for it? Would be quite strange, wouldn't it? Would be one of the things going, yeah, what would have happened? Well, like last time, like when we did what if Mercedes didn't enter Formula 1, we're going to be looking at 3 different years that were significant in the history of McLaren. Of course, 1988, 2008, and 2012. Some very good years, one very dominant year, one fairly competitive year, and one year that should have been. So, and as we all know, 2012 was a thrilling season, so was 2008. In 1988, they just completely ran away with it. Now, before we start, we know that, of course, other things would have panned out if McLaren hadn't invented Formula 1 in the first place. Drivers would have ended up at different teams. Drivers who aren't on the grid now in these seasons would have probably ended up at other teams in, of course, different scenarios. But we're trying to have a bit of fun here and just remove McLaren from 3 said years, like I've said before, and just to see what the standings would look like, what race wins would look like, and yeah, just see how different life would have been if that year that team never existed, or even if they pulled out of Formula 1 altogether. We loved making the Mercedes one, so we thought we'd do it again and do McLaren today. So let's jump into the first year, which is 1988.
November 13th, 1988. It's the end of the Formula 1 season and both championships have already been decided. Ayrton Senna is the world champion and McLaren have won the Constructors' Championship. McLaren's MP44 was an absolute monster this year, and the driver combination of Senna and Prost was one that few teams could match. Sure enough, all bar one of the Grand Prix that year were won by McLaren. The only one they didn't win was the Italian Grand Prix after Senna got schlezzed at the first chicane. Nevertheless, it asserted McLaren's status as the best team on the grid and remains nigh undominable until the early 1990s. The rivalry between Senna and Prost is starting to build, and we are headed for a classic 1989 season, with McLaren once again looking the favourites. Except that didn't happen. None of it happened. And McLaren themselves, they didn't exist in the year of 88. So what's the deal?
Now, if you wanted to watch one year as a McLaren fan in 7 years, I would say watch this one. But of course, the idea of this episode is to take seasons where McLaren are not in. And what better season to do than this one? 15 or 16 races are going to be removed. So let's get into it. And firstly, let's run down the table of the actual 1988 World Championship season in Formula 1. Now again, spoiler alert, I've got to say before I start this, if I butcher some of these names, apologies, because these are like really hard names to say. So let's start from the bottom. Now 17th place. There was actually a lot more drivers in Formula 1 at this point. 18 drivers didn't score points in that season that came and went within teams. But the first driver to score a single point is down in 17th position, and he is Pierluigi Martini from Italy. 16th position we have Nakajima. 15th place we have Andre De Saris. 14th position we have Jonathan Palmer. 13th position we have Maurizio Gugelmin. 12th position we have Eddie Cheever. 11th position we have Riccardo Patrese. In 10th place we have Alessandro Nannini. 9th position we have Nigel Mansell. 8th is Derek Warwick. 7th is Ivan Capelli. 6th place is Nelson Piquet. 5th place is Michele Alboreto. 4th place is Thierry Boutsen. 3rd place is Gerhard Berger, breaking in now to the podium. 2nd place is Alain Prost. And 1st place is Ayrton Senna, the world champion, his first world championship. And of course, those 2 drivers were from McLaren 1 and 2. And very much like when we did with Mercedes, 1 and 2 are now going to be removed. So let's run through the championship order if those 2 drivers and McLaren were not in. Now, of course, Ayrton Senna finishes, he provisionally had 94 points, finishing with 90 points in the season. and Alain Prost finished with 87. So obviously 15 and 16 wins, really strong from those two drivers in that MP44. The provisional standings without McLaren in 1988 stand like this. Now again, we have a lot of drivers that don't score points, but now we're hitting 21st position where driver does score a point. Now the driver at this point is Gabriel Tuquani. Now he didn't score a point at this point, so obviously he now breaks into scoring a point finally in his career for 1988. 20th position we have Luco Perez Sala. 9th position we have Philippe Sterif. 18th position we have Martin Brundle, again familiar name, hasn't scored a point since, so now scores 2 points, which he will be very happy with. 17th position we have Yannick Dalmas. 16th position we have Alex Coffey. 15th position we have Pierluigi Martini, the man who finished in real life with 1 point in 17th, last place of the scoring drivers in that season. In 14th position we have Andre De Celeris. 13th position we have Nakajima. 12th position we have Jonathan Palmer. 11th position we have Mugelin. 10th position we have Eddie Cheever. 9th place breaking into the top 10 is Nigel Mansell. 8th position is Riccardo Patrese. 7th position is Alejandro Nanani. 6th place is Derek Warwick. 5th place is Ivan Capelli. 4th place is Mikel Abretto. 3rd place is Nelson Piquet. 2nd place is Thierry Butzin, which means that the world champion of 1988 is the Austrian driver of Gerhard Berger. So he is 1988 world champion. Ayrton isn't, he has to wait a little bit more for a world championship. And of course Alain Prost and McLaren, and that dominant MP44 is nowhere to be seen. It's absolutely, I mean, if this happened in real life, it would be absolutely incredible. It really would have changed a lot of things in McLaren, Honda, Ayrton, and of course Alain's history in Formula 1. And now again, let's run through the wins. As I say there, in that year, 15 out of 16 wins was done by the McLaren. The other winner was Gerhard Berger at the Italian Grand Prix. Obviously, as I said, the other ones were shared between Ayrton and Alain. So let's run through the winners. With one win in that season was Michel Abretto. With 2 wins will be Nigel Mansell. 2 wins also is Ivan Capelli and Nelson Piquet. Thierry Butzon, who finishes in 2nd place, will have 4 wins, and again the world champion of Gerhard Berger would have 5 wins. Incredible for him. And Gerhard Berger would be the first Austrian since Niki Lauda to win the World Drivers' Championships in 1984, and the first Ferrari World Champion since South African driver Jody Scheckter back in 1979. Thierry Butzon also took his first win in Canada, the Canadian Grand Prix, but in real life he actually took his first win in 1989, but at that same race in Gilles Villeneuve in Canada. Great performance by him as well, of course, Belgian driver, taking his win a year earlier in Canada. So there we go there. Obviously, apologies for the pronunciations, but they are some hard drivers. If you didn't know any other drivers apart from Senna and Prost and Berger like me, then you would have no idea about the names. But there we go, that is the 88 season. An incredible performance by McLaren, taken away, and now an incredible win by Berger. Obviously, again, as we've said there, just extending the wins of Austria in the world of Formula 1, of course, following on from the great Niki Lauda. And there we go, there's 1988. Incredible season, Jordan, and but incredible for McLaren, but it's all taken away, and it does massively change the dynamics. Even I was shocked seeing that. So, yep, that was 1988.
McLaren entered the 2008 season with the cloud of their guilty verdict from the year before for espionage hanging over them. So, with a team of Heikki, Kovalainen and the young promising Lewis Hamilton driving the beautiful MP423, they really wanted to kick the season off nice and early and try and put that behind them, and that's exactly what they did with a race victory at round 1 in Australia for Lewis Hamilton. But the first part of that season was really then dominated by Ferrari, McLaren having to wait until round 6 to pick up another victory, which was again Lewis Hamilton. But the Woking outfit then really started putting some pressure on the Italian team with victories at round 9 in Great Britain for Lewis Hamilton, round 10 in Germany, and round 11 at the Hungaroring. And what that teed up was a really dramatic final end to the season. Nothing gets more dramatic than the last lap of the last race of the season. Felipe Massa crossing the line to take the victory with Lewis Hamilton in 6th position, needing a 5th spot, only for Timo Glock's car to have some issues and Lewis be able to take that position. At the time, he was the youngest driver to achieve a world championship. He was the first Drivers' Champion for McLaren since 1999. It wasn't enough to move them up from second in the Constructors, so it was a great year for McLaren, getting them up to that second spot and taking the Drivers' Championship. But that never happened. McLaren don't exist.
You couldn't write this kind of stuff, you couldn't make a movie out of this. Although, anyone watching who likes to make movies, there's potential there for a really good story. But of course, Lewis Hamilton came up triumphant in only his second year in Formula 1 in McLaren to claim his world title. And of course, like Ollie said, the youngest world champion at the time, beating the Fernando Alonso. And I can't really remember much of 2008. I was still a casual fan. I remember watching some races, but not all of them. I didn't know who many people were. Of course, I was aware of Lewis Hamilton, Jensen Button, Fernando Alonso, those usual suspects. Wasn't too aware of like some other drivers like Coulthard and Massa and those drivers who would go on to become household names in Formula 1. Well, Coulthard was, but Massa was just kind of still making a name for himself at Ferrari. So, and of course 2008 was probably a really good year for you guys. That could have been your first year of Formula 1. Your first race could have easily been Brazil 2008 if you're a British fan, of course, and any Brazilians watching, commiserations for what happened to Felipe Massa, world champion for 30 seconds. So let's jump into the standards of the real life Formula 1 season in 2008 and see who finished where, to give you a bit of a reminder in case you have forgotten. So there was 4 drivers who didn't score points, and they were Anthony Davidson, Adrian Sutil, Takuma Sato and Giancarlo Fisichella. Jensen Button was in 18th place on 3 points, Sebastian Bourdais in 17th place on 4 points, David Coulthard in his final year for Formula 1, he was in P16 on 8 points, Kazuki Nakajima in 15th place on 9 points, 14th place was Rubens Barrichello on 11 points, 13th place was the new German on the block Nico Rosberg on 17 points, Nelson Piquet, the Brazilian, is in 12th place on 19 points, 11th place is the Aussie Mark Webber on 21 points, breaking into the top 10 now, Timo Glock on 25 points, Jarno Trulli, the Italian, he's in 9th place on 31 points. Future world champion potentially is Sebastian Vettel, he's in 8th place on 35 points. Finnish driver Heikki Kovalainen is in P7 on 53 points. P6 is Nick Heidfeld on 60 points. 1 point more than him is double world champion Fernando Alonso on his return to Renault, he's on 61 points in 5th place. In 4th place is the quick Polish driver of Robert Kubica on 75 points. Tied on points with him is Finnish driver Kimi Räikkönen in the Ferrari, also on 75 points. Felipe Massa is on 97 points on 2nd place. And of course, your world champion is Lewis Hamilton on 98 points. He lost the world championship in 2007 by a point. He wins it in 2008 by a single point. So, yeah, like I said, it was very close in 2008. Ferrari and McLaren had very, very good years. Renault got a couple of wins in there, but we're not going to discuss one of those wins. And of course, BMW Sauber rocked up with a brilliant win by Robert Kubica in Canada. So let's take a look at the standards if you removed McLaren altogether. So of course, your same drivers who didn't score points in the last one, they remain pointless. Jensen Button, however, is in 16th place on 6 points. Sebastian Bourdais is on P15 on 8 points. 14th place is David Coulthard on 13 points. 13th place is Rubens Barrichello on 14 points. Kazuki Nakajima is in 12th place on 16 points. 10 points ahead of him is Nico Rosberg, his teammate, in 11th place. 10th place is Nelson Piquet on 26 points. Timo Glock remains in P9 on 34 points. Mark Webber is in 8th place on 36 points. 7th place is Sebastian Vettel on 43 points. 6th place is Jarno Trulli on 44 points. 5th place is Fernando Alonso on 73 points. 4th place is Nick Heidfeld on 76 points. Tied on points at the top 2 is Robert Kubica and Kimi Räikkönen, both on 90 points, which means Felipe Massa wins his first world title on 104 points, making it a very dominant year by the Brazilian man himself. He wins it at Brazil. Yeah, the crowd goes wild. It's a story that everyone had been waiting for. Of course, their first world champion, the Brazilian world champion, since Ayrton Senna back in 1991. So, of course, they'll be absolutely passionate about that. Let's take a look at the wins and who would have won in that year. So Felipe Massa would have won 7 Grand Prix that year, a big lead over his teammate Kimi Raikkonen, who would have only won 2 Grand Prix as well. The same as Robert Kubica, Fernando Alonso and Nick Heidfeld. He would have also got 2 very healthy wins in Formula 1. Sebastian Vettel, of course, we all know he won the Italian Grand Prix in the wets in 2008. That wouldn't have changed. Nelson Piquet also won a Grand Prix, maybe not in controversial circumstances. Is that Glock? It is Glock. He would have also won a Grand Prix in 2008, taking his first and only win of his Formula 1 career. So a good variety of wins there. And again, it still would have been quite competitive if McLaren weren't in Formula 1, or even if they got kicked out altogether. If they had a year out in 2008, if you want to kind of create this alternative world where McLaren they can't enter 2008 because of what happened in 2007. You kind of, created for yourself. And of course, both Ferraris would have got 10 podiums each, Felipe Massa and Kimi Raikkonen. So a very solid win for Ferrari. And of course, they would have remained Constructors Champions for the 16th and currently final time so far in Formula 1. When can they grab the next one? Let's see how it goes. So we've looked at 1988, we've looked at 2008. Let's hand back over to Lyle for the big year, the one that we've all been waiting for, is 2012.
So moving on now to the final season that we are going to do with McLaren. Now this is a little bit of a different one because this ends up where McLaren actually in real life don't win the World Championship, of course, which they did in the previous 2 years that we've talked about. And this, of course, is 2012. Our favourite season, or one of the favourites, definitely my personal favourite season that we've seen in a very, very, very long time in Formula 1. It ended with Sebastian Vettel and Red Bull Racing winning in a massive showdown in Brazil between Fernando Alonso and Sebastian Vettel, which ended up where Seb span in the rain. It was absolutely incredible. But anyways, we're here to talk about McLaren. Of course, the 2 drivers back then was Jenson Button and Lewis Hamilton, a name that you might have heard of, you might not have. I can't promise anything, but he was back in the McLaren in those days. And let's jump into the table of what happened in that year. We saw 7 different winners in 7 different races, which included the 2 McLaren drivers. And of course, Jenson taking his final win in Brazil. So let's see what the actual table was at this point. Now, again, we have a lot of drivers who don't score points. So all the way down in 21st position is Pedro de la Rosa, going all the way up to grid to the final driver of Vitaly Petrov in 19. So Daniel Ricciardo is in 18th position. Now he scored 10 points, so there's a massive gap between him and Vitaly Petrov, who doesn't score a point. So Daniel Ricciardo is the last driver not to score a point. And then let's move up the grid. So in 17th position we have Jean-Eric Vergne. In 16th position we have Bruno Senna. In 15th position we have Pastor Maldonado, who wins a race in this year. He actually wins the Spanish Grand Prix, which is like a massive achievement for him. 14th position we have Paul di Resta. And in 13th position we have Michael Schumacher of Mercedes, again making his second comeback in a brilliant year for him. Gets pole position in Monaco again in real life. 12th place is Kamui Kobayashi. 11th place is Nico Hülkenberg. 10th place is Sergio Perez. 9th place is Nico Rosberg in the Mercedes. Again, name that might be kind of just going past you right now. 8th place is Romain Grosjean. 7th place is Felipe Massa. 6th place is the Australian driver of Mark Webber, the teammate, of course, of Sebastian Vettel, who actually wins. 5th place is Jenson Button, the man who is in the McLaren at this point, in 2009 World Champion with Brawn. 4th place is 2008 World Champion, or in real life he was, Lewis Hamilton in 4th place. 3rd place is Kimi Raikkonen. 2nd place is Fernando Alonso, and 1st is Sebastian Vettel. As I say there, 3-point gap between them, but a great showdown in Brazil. Obviously very hindered by Sebastian spinning. So let's see what the standings look like if Lewis and Jenson and McLaren are removed. So again, we start off with quite a few drivers with no points. We have Timo Glock in 18th, who is the final driver not to score a point. And then in 17th position we have Vitaly Petrov, who scores a point. Then in 16th position we have Daniel Ricciardo. He jumps up 14 points from obviously what he scored in the real life standings. 15th position is Jean-Eric Vergne, who scores 25 points. 14th position is Bruno Senna with 54 points. 13th position is Pastor Maldonado with 60 points. 12th place is Michael Schumacher with 62 points. 11th place is Paul di Resta in the Force India with 67 points. 10th place, breaking into the top 10, is Kamui Kobayashi. Obviously, brilliant race in Japan for him in real life again with 80 points. 9th place is Nico Hülkenberg. Tied with him also is his future teammate Sergio Perez. 7th place is Nico Rosberg on 107 points. 6th place on 120 points is Romain Grosjean. 5th place is Felipe Massa on 150 points. 4th place is the Australian driver Mark Webber on 214 points. 3rd place breaking into the podium is Kimi Raikkonen with 247 points. 2nd place is Fernando Alonso on 307. And the world champion is Sebastian Vettel. So, as I said there, at the start, this is the year that McLaren didn't win. So the world champion is exactly the same Sebastian Vettel, but massive gaps there. 4th and 5th place are eliminated. That was Lewis and Jensen, and obviously a few drivers moving up in that way. So that was the table, and let's look at some of the big things that happened in that year. The wins for Lewis and Jensen were pretty special as well. Obviously Jensen took a great win in Belgium, and of course the last win in McLaren to this day, which was in Intergalos 2012. So obviously they won't happen. So Pastor Maldonado wins the Spanish Grand Prix, of course. But then we have Sergio Perez, a new winner, who wins the Italian Grand Prix. Then Nico Rosberg, of course, has one win, which he does normally in China. Romain Grosjean wins in Canada. Mark Webber has 2 wins to his name. Kimi Raikkonen has 2 wins, and he wins in Hungary, the race that was won by Lewis. Fernando Alonso has 4 wins, and Sebastian, the world champion, has 8 wins. Sergio Perez's win in Italy was the first ever Mexican driver since Pedro Rodriguez in Spa in 1970, so obviously a big win by the Mexican there. Hungary saw Lotus's first 1-2 since the Dutch Grand Prix in 1978. And Grosjean actually won in Canada, first win for Romain in his career. And Romain and Pastor won in the exact same year, so obviously it was a very special year for drivers of different teams breaking through. Of course, we had the Williams driver who wins in real life also. Doesn't win in real life, but obviously in this, he wins in a Lotus Renault, so good performance by him. Obviously that was an incredible year in real life. I'd say it was a bit more entertaining in kind of with McLaren removed. But there we go, guys. There is 2012. McLaren are removed in that year. Great season from Lewis and Jensen. As I say, 7 different winners in 7 different races. Absolutely incredible. Obviously, 2 drivers down. We have to fill in those gaps. So that was 2012. I would say a pretty good year for that. And yeah, I'd say 3 good years from McLaren, where obviously they are removed from the World Championship.
So there we have it then, 3 years done by McLaren, where we removed them from the seasons altogether. And yeah, there was a couple of changes, nothing really drastic in the removing McLaren situation, which was a bit of a disappointment when we came to do it. Like, there wasn't really that much change, but there was a couple of surprise wins in there, which, it's not all about who wins the championships, it's just about who could have won a Grand Prix, who could have been on the podium. And of course, like I said at the start of the video, if McLaren had never invented Formula 1, things would have been a lot differently, judging by the seasons we went off. So of course, things would have panned out a lot differently. Drivers wouldn't have been in Formula 1 or would have been with another team. But at the end of the day, it was just all a bit of fun. So thank you guys so much for watching here, and please do support the video as well, because it's taken us a long time to kind of research, edit, and obviously process the video all together and plan it out as well. It's taken us a good few weeks to do it. We do put in a lot of effort with this particular kind of video, and of course other videos, but this one it's probably taken us the longest, a lot longer than the Mercedes one, even though that one took us a long time to make. So please leave it a like as well, and of course let me know your suggestions in the comment section below if you do want to see another kind of experimental video. We've got 2 more in the works. 2 more F1 teams will be removing from Formula 1 in said seasons, one of which is similar to the ones that we've already done. Another one is a big one. It's a really big one, so stay tuned for that. They should be coming out in the next few months. And of course, a big thank you to Josh and Ollie TGSF1 for helping us out at the start, giving us an explanation of the 2008 and 1988 seasons. Link to their social medias and YouTube channels will be in the description below. But guys, thank you so much for watching. Watch what you're doing. Take care as always. And until next time, we'll see you later.